And good afternoon. Welcome, everybody, to Deering Live on this beautiful Thursday. As always, same time, same place, different guest. And welcome, Mr. Ned Luberecki. How you doing?
Hey, welcome to my place as well, as this is how we do things now, right? Yeah.
This is, for now. There's light, I understand, at the end of
There is indeed.
the tunnel. Absolutely. David, as always, pleasure.
Hey, good to see you. Good to see you, Ned. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm going to do a real quick introduction for you, sir. And for those of you that don't know Ned, he is an award-winning banjo player, having won the IBMA Banjo Player of the Year Award in 2018, amongst others. And he's currently looking after banjo duties for the magnificent Becky Bueller. He is also a host on Sirius XM radio, part of the Bluegrass Junction over there, channel 62, and can be heard on Sundays and Saturdays, I hear. But join us for a little while as we sit back and we chat with one of the best players and, frankly, voices in the whole of Bluegrass, Mr. Ned Luberecki. Welcome aboard, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You want to play us a little ditty to get started here?
Here we go. Here's one that I wrote.
All right.
You got to get the Kruger wiggle at the end.
Yep, the Kruger tremolo. What's that called?
That is the Nedscape Navigator. That should
right.
tune just a little bit. It's the named after the imaginary software that you might use to surf the internet. Not something I would recommend anyone do. But,
It's the dark web that you end up on. But what is that on? What album is that? Is that on one of your albums?
Oh, I recorded that a long time ago. It showed up on a couple of things on Rebel Records. They did one sort of compilation of a bunch of banjo things. I also recorded it once with the Rarely Heard on an album that I think almost all of them are out of print. It's probably due to be re-released at some point. I'd like to re-record it someday, actually. So one day maybe it will. It's out there somewhere, but it's one that's it's an old one, but it's one of my favorites to play when there's not anybody else around. If I'm supposed to do a solo banjo thing, because it kind of provides its own rhythm.
Yeah.
And and it's one of those tunes that it's one of my favorites of any of them that I've come up with. And I think, like anybody, if you write tunes, or if you write songs, or if you write music, you probably have favorites, and then you have ones that you don't think as much about, and there are a few of mine that that I've let go of, but that's always been one of my favorites. And of the ones that I tend to favor, I notice that they are the ones that almost wrote themselves. They just came out whole. And that one, when I remember when I wrote it, I was still living back in Maryland. I'm originally from Maryland, and I was sitting at my kitchen table with the banjo out. I don't remember why. If I have to have a banjo with me almost anywhere, and I was just fooling around with that sort of drone on the fourth string. And then moving different chords around. And listening to how it sounded, and within a few minutes I started to go. And then it just, from there, just flowed out. It just came out all in one piece.
That's always great when that just kind of happens. You just sit down. So many times you sit down and kind of, you noodle around on your instrument, and it just stays. You come up with little ideas, but they just kind of evaporate. And then when they kind of stick and it all comes together, it's a magical thing. There's no real strategy behind it. It just kind of happens, right?
You're just channeling them. It's like the tune needs to get out, and it just comes out on its own, and just don't want to get in its way. I do remember, and thinking about that, and this is sort of circling back, but in a different kind of way. I was thinking about a tune that John Hartford wrote one time. And I got to meet John a few different times through the years, and this was maybe the first time that I ever got to meet him and be around him for any length of time. And this was back in the 1980s at a bluegrass festival I was playing down in Florida. And he had played, I think the song that I'm remembering was the Delta Queen Waltz. It was a really pretty waltz tune that he performed. And I asked him if he had written that tune on the banjo or the fiddle or how he wrote it. And he told me that he wrote it on paper. And I kind of looked at him, and I said, really, you didn't have an instrument? And he said, when the melody started coming to me, he said it was a pure melody, and I didn't want to influence it on a particular instrument. And then I love this because, John was so quotable. He said, because our fingers tend to follow familiar paths, So if he had written it on the fiddle, he would have automatically applied fiddle licks to it, and he would have made it very fiddly. And if he had written it on the banjo, well, he would have written it following something that he was used to doing on the banjo. But since he had that melody in his head, he just wanted to put the melody down in kind of a pure form, just on paper, and then apply an instrument to it, so that he wouldn't spoil the melody and make it lean one way or the other, which I thought was very clever, a very wise thing from a very wise guy.
Yeah. How do you kind of, when you get a good idea, how do you kind of capture it so you do remember it the next day? So it doesn't just go into the.
If something comes to me and I sort of like it, I'll grab my phone. Used to be I would grab a recorder and try to record it that way. I've never been good at sort of jotting things down. You don't usually write it down like on paper or in tablature or anything like that. So I'll try to, if something starts coming to me, most of the time when that happens, I'm lucky enough that I have an instrument in my hands and I can sort of flesh it out right there. There's a few things that I've found on my phone. You always think you've come up with some brilliant idea. You think, oh, this is going to be great. And then you go back through your phone and you hit the button and you listen and you're like, oh, that's just Earl's Breakdown again.
Right.
I've written Earl's Breakdown probably 200 times. I just listen back to it and I'm like, well, that's pretty good because it's Earl's Breakdown. Earl's already written all the good ones. The rest of us we're just scraping at it.
What about, do you get frustrated? I know myself, I sometimes do because I'll record on my phone, the voice recorder, and then I have to transcribe myself. And sometimes I have trouble transcribing myself, and
No, because most of the time, if something comes to me, when I get back to it, it'll be soon enough that I won't have forgotten it too much. I just really need the reminder.
Mhm.
I just need those first 4 notes to get the ball rolling, and then somehow it will come back. And then even if it doesn't, I've had this happen before where I jotted something down, and then I started playing with it, and come back to it an hour later, and then just pick up the banjo and start playing it and go like, yeah, this is that thing I worked on, and then find out that it was wrong, that I wasn't doing what was, that I changed it, it had already morphed into something else, but the
Right.
something turned out to be better. So it's like, wow, there you go. Let's run with that. Yeah.
Right. So, how when did you start playing the banjo? How old were you?
I was about 13, I think it was about 1978. And the way it happened, my my mother worked for a company that did like industrial air conditioning work. She was a bookkeeper, and but her boss, the guy that owned the company, and this was in Maryland. This is just like south of Baltimore, somewhere around the Chesapeake Bay, and her boss, it turns out, must have been a bluegrass fan, because every once in a while he would have some kind of a corporate party or some sort of event, and he would hire a bluegrass band to play. I guess he must have liked it, and so we went to this company. I don't know, it was a company party. It was at this restaurant that he also owned, and there was a bluegrass band playing. And up until that point, about all the banjo or bluegrass that I had been exposed to was just dueling banjos was on the radio, and the Beverly Hillbillies. I remember
Hmm.
that. But watching this band play, I was fascinated by the banjo player. I just kept watching him play, and there was something about the fact that the banjo was just going all the time. Like even when everybody else, the guitar player was strumming, and the fiddle player would play something, and then he'd kind of step back, and the mandolin player, to my eyes, was just strumming, but the banjo was just always doing something. He just kept this thing going, and something about the sound of it, just hearing that sound going. And so at the time, again, I must have been 12 maybe when I saw this band, and maybe just about 13. And mom, I told my mom, I said, I'd like to learn how to play that. And she said, "Really, the banjo?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah." And so she went up during the break, and I met the banjo player. I even remember the name of the band. The band was a Maryland-based band. They were called Coup de Grace, and I bought a record of theirs. I have their record somewhere. But mom asked the banjo player. She said, "So my son wants to learn how to play one of those things. How much does it cost? How much does one cost?" And I only know this because I remember seeing the picture on the album cover. The guy was playing, and again, this would have been about 1978. The guy was playing a Stelling banjo, and he said, "Well, this is kind of a good one, and it cost about $900." And mom was like, "What? $900? It's a round thing with a stick. How can it be so much?" But then the guy said, "No, but you can get one for a lot cheaper. You can get like a $100 or $200 one." So that's what we did. We went out to the music store and bought some. It was just one of those Asian import. Had a big sticker with an eagle on the back of it. And it was about $100 and a couple of picks and a book. And I still have that book somewhere. It was really useless. It really didn't have anything useful in it. And I found eventually a music store close to where I lived that opened up there, where a guy was giving banjo lessons, and he set me up with some picks and started showing me the ropes. And the other thing that I think, where this all, once again, being a small world of the bluegrass world, the guy that I originally took banjo lessons was a guy named Bob Tice. Well, his son Jordan Tice is now a member of the band Hawktail and an amazing guitar player, and lives just a couple of blocks from me here in Nashville. And it was his dad that was my first banjo teacher back in Annapolis, Maryland.
Wow. And what was, when you're learning, do you remember some of the you're a teacher and you see a lot of the struggles, but what were one of the struggles that you had when you're trying to, and how'd you overcome those struggles?
Oh man, the biggest struggle was, and I remember this. I remember this really really well because it was the first the first book I had that I learned out of was that Pete Wernick Bluegrass Banjo book, and I still have a copy of it around here somewhere too. Um, and it was a great book to get started with. There are a lot of books out there. I've written a couple of books, and most beginner banjo books kind of do the same thing. They teach you how to play a few rolls, and they get you going on that, and then they play these rolls in a particular order, along with every once in a while a melody note, and you somehow it comes out sounding like the tune. Well, the problem I had was I remember one of the first songs in there that I learned how to play was "Coming Around the Mountain," and I remember really well trying to how the first line of "Coming Around the Mountain" went, and for me playing it, it went. And I couldn't hear "Coming Around the Mountain" in that to save my life because I was playing it one note at a time, being very careful to get, note after note. It wasn't until later that, I weeks and weeks into it that I figured out it was. And then make the D chord. So it took a while, and that was frustrating. The thing that I eventually years later, because I started teaching after I'd only been playing for 2 years. The teacher moved on, went to a different job, and they needed somebody to teach, and the store offered the job to me, even though I'd only been playing about 2 years. They said, "You were his best student, we need somebody, the gig is yours." So I did it. But it wasn't until later that I thought that wouldn't it have been better if somebody had just showed me how to play a melody on a song. If they'd show me how to go, and just learn how to play the melody, pick it out and make it come out sounding like the tune. Then start to embellish it with rolls. And do it that way. And I changed my teaching style after I kind of figured that out and started teaching that along with sort of the standard. Here's how you play a couple of rolls. Here's how you play a C chord. But here's how you can start with just the melody of a song. And I was a lot more successful as a teacher by doing that because it just gives somebody something that is recognizable right off, I think.
Yeah. So, as a teacher too, we get bogged down into too much, not giving them something that they can take home and play for somebody, where it becomes a little too mathematical, and giving them a melody to play, I think makes it a little more enjoyable.
And then the other thing that I've learned is that I would start with a song, something really simple like Yankee Doodle, and I would have them play Yankee Doodle. And then I would tell them, play it just like that. Play it like you would sing it. And eventually a student would ask me, they would say, okay, but, will you write it down for me? Just write it down. If you'll write it down, it'll be faster. So I would write it down in tab. I would, 0, 0, 2, 4, 0, 4, 2, and I'd do it that way. And then they would come back the next week and they'd say, okay, I learned it. And I'd say, well, great, play it. And then we go. There, I got it. And I would just shake my head and say, okay, you would never sing it to me that way. You would never sing, Yankee Doodle went to town riding on the pony. You wouldn't do that. So I would stress again that you got to play it. You got to really make it sound like music, even if it's just Yankee Doodle, even if it's just those couple of notes. Just make it sound like you're singing it. Make it sound like your banjo is singing. Make it come out like that. And then once you can do that, the rest of it's going to come a lot smoother.
It's good advice. Very good advice. What was your first professional playing gig? What was you play with a lot of different players, but what was your first like real professional gig?
My first real, well, there were a couple of things. The first band I ever put together came from, there was a music store in Baltimore, Maryland, back when I was getting started, called Baltimore Bluegrass. And Mike Munford worked there also. And
Wow.
I worked there together for about 5 years. I was there for about 5 years. Mike was there for a lot longer. Um, they had jam sessions on Friday nights, and when I was just getting started playing, I would go up there on Friday nights and sit in the jams. And once again, this was one of the things where my mom's boss, they had some kind of a thing. It was an auction or something they were having, and they wanted to hire a bluegrass band, and they hired a band, and then they offered to me. They said, "Hey, if Ned can get some of his friends together, they can come out and play too, and we'll give them $200." $200, man, 16 years old, $200. So
Yeah.
I found a couple of the guys from that jam session, and we worked up a set of songs and we played, and we called ourselves Cornerstone. I don't know why. That was my first paying gig, was to do that. But from there, I played in a local band around Baltimore called the Seder Hill Band, which is still together. We started the Seder Hill Band in 1983, I think, and the band is still going. I mean, it's a bunch of different people, but the core of the band is still there. And from there, my first real professional on the road band was a band called Paul Adkins, and that was back in the late '80s, early '90s. We traveled around, played a lot of festivals throughout all around the country. We played around the U.S. and a couple of Canadian things, and yeah, that was my first big one. That was the first band I ever went to the IBMA trade show in Owensboro with. I went. I think I might have been at the first one of those in the late 1980s.
Wow. And then what do you think for, you've been successful as playing as a sideman with a lot of different acts, and for up and coming banjo players, what do you think is some good advice for them to be able to get hired, what makes what do you think about, is it about that you're playing makes people hire you, and maybe it's also playing in other professional aspects too?
Well, there's a lot. There's a lot that goes into it, and the advice that I would give anybody, first of all, one thing for me personally is I enjoy a lot of different styles of music. So if I love straight ahead bluegrass. I love Flatt and Scruggs. I love Bill Monroe. I love that style of bluegrass. I also loved Newgrass Revival. I love the infamous String Dusters. I love the Kruger Brothers. I love so many things that are, whether people consider them to be traditional bluegrass or not. I just like the music, and so. But I also feel like I have some respect for all of it. So if somebody were to hire me to play in a very straight ahead bluegrass band, well, I would respect that, and I would play that style, and I would love it. It would be a lot of fun to play a whole night of Jimmy Martin and Flatt and Scruggs songs, and just really bear down and play that style. But then if somebody were doing something else, I feel like as a player myself, because I'm interested in all those different styles, I've learned a little bit about all of them, and so I think versatility has been something that has been really helpful to me. I know that helped me when I started with Becky's band, as a matter of fact, because when she decided to start her own band, the first solo album she put out, well, it wasn't her first solo album, but it was the first one she did when she decided to go out on her own as an artist. She used a bunch of different players on that, including me. I played banjo on one song, but Scott Vestal played on it with the Sam Bush Band. They were on a few of the songs. Ron Block played on it. There was some other banjo on there as well. But so the songs ranged from something really kind of bluegrassy with that Ron Block sort of, driving, thing, to one that had Scott Vestal doing some Scott Vestal-y kind of pyrotechnics in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that playing with Becky, she needed to have a banjo player that could do both. And at the time, I was also playing with Chris Jones and the Night Drivers. When the first year that I filled in with Becky, she was just using me to fill in. And she called me simply because she knew that I could do both of those things. And then for that whole first year, she kept saying, well, I realize that you're playing in Chris's band and I've only got you on loan. So if you can help me find a banjo player to, to replace you, keep your ears open. And I kept thinking about that and trying to think of players that I knew that could do it. And I wasn't coming up with a lot. I mean, there definitely are some, but, most of them were already working in different bands. And it kind of gave me my own little pat on the back just to think, well, that's kind of cool. I'm one of the people who can fit both of these bills. But then at the same time, I also kept thinking, who do I want to have this gig? And I kept thinking, well, I don't want anybody to have this gig. I think I like this gig. And that's when I kind of had to make a decision.
Right.
But that's one thing, versatility. You want to be not only have the respect for the kind of music that you're supposed to be playing, but you want to be versatile enough to do a few different kinds of things. You want to be able. The other one is, and this is something that goes for anybody that's trying to make a career, kind of like I have, where some of it is recording, some of it is teaching, whatever other things. Is be able to learn stuff fast. You got to be a quick study. You got to be able to, in a recording session, they put a chart in front of you. You got to be able to do more than just play the chords that are on the chart. You've got to be able to play the chords that are on the chart and do something interesting with them, and then be ready to change on a dime when the producer says, I really think we want to go a different direction. Instead of doing this, I want you to do something more like that. Be ready to do that, be ready, and be ready by just keep playing all the time and try to immerse yourself in it. Try to be ready to handle any of those kind of circumstances, and then be fun to be along with. Just try not to be try not to complain.
Yeah, that can go far away in lots of careers.
Yeah, I mean, when my wife and I were first together, and we would go to the Station Inn and watch bands, and sometimes we would go see some of our favorite bands there, and then we would also see bands of throw together bands of people locals or anything like that, and or even at the jam sessions they used to do there. And my wife would say, well, what about this person? Are they good enough to be in a band? Or what about that? Is he good enough to be in a band? And I would say at some point anybody's good enough to be in a band. It's whether you can be in a van with them for 12 hours.
Night after night, for a month at a time, for a week at a time, or a month at a time, or whatever.
Right. If you can be out on the road for a week at a time, then you're good enough to be in a band. Yeah.
Right. Well, the versatility is. I definitely listening to your album, Take 5. There's definitely some versatility in there. You're playing straight ahead bluegrass style tunes, and then you're playing some jazz standards too. So it definitely comes across there. Do you want to play anything that shows some of your versatility right now?
Let's see.
Very nice.
Earl's Court. that one's called.
Earl's Court.
And named after a neighborhood in London.
Okay.
There's
on that
there.
on that opening track on take 5, I was listening to Night Driver.
Oh yeah.
That one thing that stood out in there, it's a for people, it's a pretty straight ahead bluegrass instrumental style tune, I would say, but with some modern single string playing in there. So you get you're playing a mixture of Scruggs rolls and some single string licks. Is that correct? Would you say?
Yeah. Let's see. I'm trying to remember how the tune goes. I haven't played it in a while. Let's see. It's yeah, that part right there. And the up the neck part. I can't remember how I played it exactly, but it was something along the lines of. I think that was it. Yeah, I can't remember it anymore. It had a lot of that kind of nonsense in it. I remember that. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that tune in a while. We haven't played it. That's one of those ones that we recorded and then played it a couple of times. Well, as a matter of fact, that was right during the transition. Since it is called Night Driver, it was Chris Jones and the Night Drivers playing with me. And then right after we recorded it is about the time that I left that band and started playing with Becky. And it felt a little weird to play it. It felt almost like cheating, to play.
I hear.
Play a song called Night Driver with the Becky Buller band. But I think we did. But yeah, I forgot about that.
One thing I liked in that is those you have the rolls going, and then you have the little licks, like the single string lick, when you're up the neck. But it's very smooth. It's very consistent that you don't lose that drive. I know when I switch between the styles, sometimes there's a little bit of a change when I have an attack or something. When it just
it's hard. I know.
How'd you get there, and how what are some suggestions on practicing that?
Well, I don't know that I've fully gotten there, and I'll say this about it because I remember I had a student one time, a very advanced student, who wanted to learn something. It was something from the Noam Pikelny Plays Kenny Baker Plays Bill Monroe record, which is a phenomenal piece of work that Noam did. And of course, I know what you're saying is it's like when you're playing Scruggs style, you have a very rolly kind of sound, and it's a consistent sound within that style. Then when you start to play melodic style, the tone can change a little bit. So the melodic style tends to be really smooth sounding, and it's got this sort of flowing motion to it. Scruggs style can be a little more exaggerated. It can have some stops and starts, and it can have some maybe more dynamic elements to it. Because the pull-offs can be really sort of violent sounding, where melodic style tends to be a little different. And then when you play single string style, of course, when you're comparing it to melodic style. When you're playing melodic style, you play one note and then the next note, and they both ring together. When you play single string style, you just play the second note, your first note goes away. So it's a lot choppier sounding. To me, when I listen to Noam play something like he did on that Kenny Baker Plays Bill Monroe record, or Noam Plays Kenny Plays Bill, I can't tell the difference between his single string playing and his melodic style playing because he pays attention to every note in melodic style to just give it its microsecond, and then he mutes them slightly so that he can move into the next position so that they all sound the same. And that is a level of dedication to the banjo that is above my pay grade. It's just it's that, and I try to tell people that so that you can fully appreciate. I remember when I was first learning how to play, and to me, I knew nothing, and so my teacher and Earl Scruggs and Tony Trischka all knew everything. They were so far ahead of me that I couldn't tell the difference between them. Then later, as I started to get a little bit better, I could start to appreciate, oh man, that thing that so and so is doing is really advanced, and then I could start to see, so you start to see how far ahead the guy in first place is. And so when I try to express this to people, I try to tell them, the level of dedication that a player like Noam or Bela or Ryan Kavanaugh, that they've worked, the level of dedication that they've worked to be able to do what they do is really, really something. And I'm not doing this to sell myself short. I know that I've put a lot of work into it also, but there is a different level there. So on the other side of that, sometimes when it comes to single string style, and this is one of the things that I've always admired about Tony Trischka's playing. Tony's playing to me, and Tony is one of my favorite musicians ever in the world, and one of my favorite people in the world. I mean, I love Tony to death, and his playing, it feels very emotional to me. I don't mean to say that it's less refined, but sometimes it just comes right at you. It just hits you like a brick. And sometimes, it's very soft and flowing and beautiful, but sometimes he'll play angry banjo music. And what I notice is sometimes he uses single string style he uses the full advantage of it, the sort of choppiness of it and the sort of staccato-ness of it in order to make a point, in order to make a musical point. He uses that advantage to it. And so to me, when I play single string style, sometimes I try to make it as clean and as fluid as I can, but sometimes I make it, and let it slap, let it get a little nasty, because you can get that, and that can be part of the sound also. But then, if you're trying to make it sound really clean and that, it just does take a lot of work.
Yeah, it's good advice though. It's good to let people know, that the level of, like what you said, the Gnomes and the Belas and the Ryans, like that dedication to get to where they're at is.
Yeah, and it's and when you look at that, or when you listen to players that have put that kind of work into it, besides the fact that I enjoy listening to the music that they make, I do want people to have an appreciation for that. But I think it's also important for people to know that music is more than that. That dedicating your life to making your single string style sound as clean as possible is a worthy goal. But when it comes to technique, and we think about musicians that have flawless technique and can do these incredible things, I also go back to think about a guitar player like, I compare, say, Steve Vai, Stevie Ray Vaughan. Steve Vai can play technical things. I just saw a video of him playing an entire piece just with his left hand. That was mind-blowing. He can do these kinds of things. Stevie Ray Vaughan, he could never do the things that Steve Vai could do, but Stevie Ray Vaughan could make me cry. I him play a solo on the guitar, and it would make me tear up just from the emotion that he put into what he played. And no amount of technique in the world will teach you how to do that. That's just emotion. That's just playing what you feel, and that's pretty amazing too, and so it's another level of music that so many levels of music.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about it. But as in the bluegrass world and the jazz world, we definitely can get hung up on technique a little bit too much, or even the rock world when as guitar rock players, we can get stuck there and then never kind of find our own voice. And you're also playing a number of kind of, when you're doing the single string licks or that tune, kind of guitar style licks. Are you a guitar player too?
A little bit. I played banjo first, so when I play guitar, I tend to play it like a banjo player. And any of the sort of rock and roll licks that I've learned how to play on guitar, or even well, let's see. I guess maybe it's time to get this one out. I was influenced by a guy who painted his guitars like this. So yeah, this is my Deering Crossfire. I can't remember when I got this one. I got this one a long time ago. I could probably tell you the serial number on it, and you could look it up for me.
And was that a custom stain, custom finish?
Okay, so here's what I did. I modified this one quite a bit. Well, maybe not too much, but I did paint it. I 5150'd it. I painted it like Van Halen. For anybody that know, Eddie Van Halen famously sort of painted his guitars this way, and then had a lot of stuff, that ended up painting. And the way Van Halen first did it, his main guitar, the one that everybody called the Frankenstrat, because it was a Stratocaster style guitar that he built himself out of just parts that he bought in local, parts shops and things. But the original body of it was black, and then he wrapped tape around it, painted it white, and pulled the tape off, and then it was white with black stripes. And so on the very first Van Halen record, you can see a picture of him, holding that guitar, and it's just it looks like it's a white guitar with black stripes, and that's how he did it. Well, later he put tape around it in another random pattern and painted it red, and then came up with something that looked like this. And that's what I did to this one. This was a black Crossfire, and I wrapped it up with the painter's tape and painted it white, and then pulled the tape off, and it was black and white. And then I taped it up again in a random way and painted it red, and then
that's great.
Clear coat on it so that I could make it look Van Halen-y. I did a couple other things to it that are just a little bit non-standard, and I hope Greg Deering doesn't shoot me for this, but. What I noticed was I wasn't getting the same volume level out of the bridge pickup as I was the neck pickup. So I wanted to bring the neck pickup closer. So I actually just took a razor knife and cut a hole in the head. Didn't break. It was great. I took a pickup mounting ring and put it on there. It kind of glued it on. And I brought this pickup out to the front so that it was closer to the strings. And these are the pickups that it came with. They were EMG humbucking pickups. But I also mounted some screws and for the one in the back so that I could adjust it. You can access the pickups through these little plates on the back here. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I did to it, because the way the Crossfire usually works is the banjo head is still an acoustic banjo. It's just like a little hoop in here, and the difference between the top of the head and the chamber is only a quarter of an inch or something like that. I put a neoprene practice pad in there, so this is like completely dead everywhere except right under the bridge where the pickup is. And the reason I did that was I was playing in this band that was a I don't know, they were a country rock pseudo. They were called the Apocalyptic Cowboys, and one of the guitarists in the band was a metalhead, and he played through a Marshall stack, and I couldn't get an acoustic banjo loud enough, and I could barely get this one loud enough. So I kind of did all that to it, and then I made it where I could play this at any volume I wanted. I could get rock star volume out of this thing. So let me see. I have a little amplifier here that maybe it'll. I can remember how to do this. Turn that down. Turn this up. There we go. Yeah, so you get the idea. I haven't figured out how to put a whammy bar on it yet. That's coming next. That's the next thing you can do. But you, of course, if I put it on a less severe, let's see, put it on this. What is that setting? I'm just using a little battery-powered Roland amp here, so it's not. There's not a lot of control I have the sound. But there is just the neck pickup. There's the blend of the two. And then that one's just the bridge pickup. So that I could get them sounding a lot more. Usually the blend of the two, if I'm playing in a really loud situation, seems to work really well. It's the thing is, if you try to amplify an acoustic banjo and get it into the mix of a really loud stage volume, if there's drums and a lot of electric instruments that are, if there's an electric guitar and an electric bass guitar on there, those instruments tend to sustain a lot. And the banjo, an acoustic banjo, and the acoustic banjo sound doesn't. And it'll cut. You'll be able to hear the notes, but they'll kind of pop and they'll go away and they'll get swallowed up in the mix a lot. So even though this sounds very sustainy for a banjo, it doesn't really sound like an acoustic banjo. Once you put it into the mix with a really loud electric mix, then it really does cut through sounding like a banjo. So it's one of the arguments that I know people have made when they hear one of these or another kind of solid body banjo is they'll say, well, it doesn't really sound like a banjo. And then I'll say, well, a Telecaster doesn't sound like a D28 either.
Right.
Electric guitar and there's an acoustic guitar, and they both have a place in the world. And so, yeah, there's an acoustic banjo and there's an electric banjo. And sometimes, if you're playing in a situation where it's needed, where you do want to have a banjo sound and you just can't make an acoustic banjo do it, one of these will definitely do it. But then, as we've seen with players like Bela and other folks who've done so many other things with these, there's becoming a body of work for electric banjo. It's an instrument that's taking on its own form. It's not just made to be a banjo that you can be louder with. People are using it to full advantage to play, to create music on, which is the point.
Yeah. I mean, I've had this conversation with Ryan Kavanaugh because he's playing electric banjo. And he's playing with a lot of effects and single string, not a lot of the fifth string. And it's like, why? And he plays guitar. Why are you playing guitar versus playing banjo? And he's just like, well, I like the challenge, I guess, but there is a point to it, and there's something different about it, because when you do hit that fifth string, or you play differently a little bit too, as than if you picked up a guitar, I think. Would you agree with that?
I mean, there are definitely, there comes a point where if you're playing all single string, and that is something that I think about sometimes with banjo, is I think about, trying to keep it banjo-y. And this is, I'm not on a level of the music that Ryan is playing. Again, he's taken the banjo to all different places. But there is definitely, I think about it, one of the places it really becomes obvious to me, and I'm going to grab a regular banjo again to kind of do this. I'll grab a different Deering banjo. I'll grab the one I probably play around the house the most. Love this little thing. Is you can start to play things that sound very guitarish. You can start to play things that sound very whatever-ish. But I always like it when it comes back to banjo. And as an example, you can play certain tunes that, you know, like if you're playing melodic style fiddle tunes, you can play things that are very note for note exactly what the fiddle would play. But at some point, it sounds better if you bring back another good old banjo pull-off. You know, like instead of to go. You know, play a lot of the melody, get a lot of the fiddle tuney kind of thing going on, but then come back and play a pull off. You know, and stick one of those in there, and that brings it back to banjo. You know, use your fifth string, get a forward roll going every once in a while, and that's what people associate with banjo. You know, that's what makes it sound like, well, to me, like bluegrass banjo playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And do you ever use somebody's asking, what about an acoustic banjo with a pickup? Do you ever use a pickup on your banjo, or when you're playing, do you usually?
Yeah, I do that quite a bit when me and Stephen Mogen play. I use usually I use a Fishman pickup. I've been experimenting lately with the Tone Dexter, that stomp box that you can sample your own sounds.
Mm-hmm.
The instructions that come with the Tone Dexter tell you can't use it with a Fishman pickup, but you can. And there are some issues you have to kind of dial back some frequencies for feedback. But I've got there's as long as I'm doing it, I haven't brought this one out yet. I've got my Fishman pickup wired into this banjo right here.
And what is that banjo before you get going? That's
the old Hartford. And
there you go.
you know, the funny thing is, when I got this banjo, I bought this banjo at IBMA. I think it was maybe the last year that the IBMA convention was here in Nashville. I remember I just kept hanging out at the Deering booth, and I was playing, all the banjos there, and I kept playing this one. I really liked the sound of it, and it was not strung up in low tuning like it is now. It was strung up with regular light gauge strings. It was up to standard pitch, and that's what I did with it for the first several years that I had this banjo. I just kept it as a bluegrass banjo. As a matter of fact, John Weisberger did an album called "I've Been Mostly Awake." It was a benefit album for the IBMA, and I played my Ten Brooks on about half of it, and I played this banjo on about half of it in standard tuning. And man, it was a great sounding bluegrass banjo. In the past couple of years, I've been doing a lot of recording where people have asked for the low tune banjo sound, and so I tried just tuning down one of the other ones, and I did a few other things, and finally one day I thought, well, it seems cliche. I'll just go ahead and put the low strings on the Hartford banjo. I did, and it sounded great. So now this one is my low tune banjo, and I've been using it a lot. It's actually been on the new Becky Buller album. It's on 3 or 4 tunes. It's on Stephen Mogen's new album. I used it on a couple of tunes on that. And I'm using basically the Julia Bell strings,
Yeah. Steam-powered aeroplane, right?
And yeah.
And you, again, you're using the Julia Bell strings on that, you said. Right?
Yeah, I can't remember what the gauges are, but they're really heavy. It's like a 20 for a third string and a 24 for a fourth, something like that. They're if you just try to tune regular strings down that low, they just get all floppy.
They're floppy, yeah.
Yeah. So I finally just made the decision, since I was getting called to play low banjo enough times, that I would just throw low strings on this one, and it's I almost feel like I now need to get another Hartford banjo so that I can have one in regular tuning, because I sort of miss playing this one in regular tuning. There's something about it, about the wood tone ring, that has sort of and I hope this makes sense. It has kind of a boingy sound. It's like a regular metal tone ring banjo has this ringy, pop to it, but this one has this sort of, the strings almost go boing, and it kind of makes me think a little bit about what a calfskin head sounds like. They kind of a little bit when they play, and the note kind of springs out instead of being really sharp sounding. And so even with like light strings playing bluegrass style on this, that was sort of the tone that I got out of it. And besides the fact that it's also weightless compared to
right, definitely.
When you start to get in your mid 50s, it's like, oh, hey, this light banjo feels pretty good.
Right, that 3 pounds you save, definitely makes a difference.
3 pounds makes a difference for sure.
And the first banjo you played, somebody was asking, what was that? That was your Saratoga Star, right?
Yeah, it's a Saratoga Star, and it's a once again, when I can't remember what year I got this banjo, but it's another one that I got at IBMA, and it was whatever year that Tony Trischka won Banjo Player of the Year and got Album of the Year for his double
bluegrass banjo spectacular.
Yeah, because I was playing those tours with Tony back then, and he was playing his Saratoga Star back in those days, and that's of course what made me want one, because I wanted to be like Tony. Everybody would be more like Tony. What a world! But yeah, this one is a little different than Tony's. This one is the standard 06 tone ring. Doesn't have the Kruger tone ring. And of all things, it was Jens Kruger who talked me into this combination, because he had told me, at least at that time, that he had taken the Kruger ring out of his banjo and was playing an 06. And he suggested that the 06 was a little heavier than the Kruger tone ring, and had a little more sustain. And he, Jens kind of told me, he was like, I think that would suit your playing style better. And I thought, well, if Jens says it, that's pretty good advice.
And what strings do you have on there? Somebody was asking that as well.
The D'Addario, I think they're EJ60S. The D'Addario light gauge with a stainless steel fourth string. Yep, and about the only thing I've done to this banjo, I think I changed the head on it a few years ago, because this head's pretty new, and I did put a smile bridge on it. I ordered one of those, so that really made a difference. I really thought I liked that bridge a lot. Yeah.
How do you think the tone changed with the smile bridge?
Yeah. It seemed a little clearer on this banjo. It had been, I guess, the bridge that was on it was one of those Greg signature bridges. It didn't have any writing on it other than his sort of G in ballpoint pen. And that was a great sounding bridge too. But I when this one came out, I think it was Greg Cahill who actually told me that he first tried one of these, and he really liked it. So I called up and ordered one and put it on there. Yeah, it's been on there ever since. Yeah.
Very good. Well, Jamie, Do you have any questions?
I have countless questions, none of which are related to this live stream, so I'm going to rely on other people's questions today. Give me a second. Hey, just before we do that, I loved your listening to you talk about Steve Vai being able to do so much more than Stevie Ray Vaughan, but Stevie Ray Vaughan could make you cry. Like, it's so true. I remember there's a quote from Carol Kay, who's a very famous bass player, and she said something to the effect of you're supposed to move people, not bore them with technical prowess. And that just is ingrained in my brain for years. And it's absolutely true. Also my excuse to not, spend 10 hours a day trying to tap or anything like that. But she's right, it's the same idea. So, all right, let me put up a few of these questions here. How did you get into radio announcing? We haven't touched on that. But what was your kind of foray into that?
Ever since I was a kid, I listened to radio announcers and always thought it was cool. And I would try to sound like them. I would hear a TV commercial and the voiceover announcer would say, part of this complete breakfast with 8 essential vitamins and minerals. And then I would just say, part of this complete breakfast with 8 essential vitamins and minerals. And try to sound like that. I used to sit and just read, cold copy. I would just pick something up and read it. I'm trying to think I'm trying to look if there's anything around here I could read at you, but I literally would pick up like the cereal box from the breakfast table and just start reading the ingredients or reading whatever the words were on it, just trying to sound like an announcer. And the first time I actually worked for a radio station, I was living in Frederick, Maryland, and WFMD radio their broadcast studios were a block away from my house. And I just walked over there one day and said, I would like to have a job on the radio. Do you have anything available? And they they gave me an air shift in the overnights. They trained me and got me started. I worked there for a while. I worked at several different radio stations through the years. I worked at a radio station out in Arkansas. I worked for one, a couple others. And it wasn't until I started working for Sirius, which eventually merged with XM to become Sirius XM, that was the first time I ever played bluegrass on the air. I've done everything else. Worked at a news talk station. I played rock and roll. I'd had a gospel music show for a while. Southern gospel. I did. I've done all kinds of things, and it wasn't until I worked for Sirius that I ever played bluegrass music on the air.
Did you kind of feel like it had come kind of full circle at that point, the first time you got to play the music that you loved on the radio for the first time?
I didn't think it was real.
How many people are listening?
Aspects of my personality would ever have anything to do with each other. I really always thought that having any job in radio was going to be separate from bluegrass or from the music that I played, and ever since I was like 13, 14 years old, and this is absolutely the truth. There were only 3 things I ever thought that I wanted to do with my life, and that was radio announcer, banjo player, Jedi Knight.
Did you do the third one?
I've got a lightsaber right up over here.
There we go. That's perfect. That's perfect. You have to come out to California again. Did you? You probably haven't been out here since they did the make your own lightsaber thing at Disneyland.
I haven't.
Yeah. I'll introduce you to Nathan. He works here at the company. He's been there a couple of times. Got a couple of lightsabers. You guys can meet up and fulfill your third dream there. That would be.
That would be it, man. Jedi Knight. Fun,
Absolutely. Due to COVID, what is the biggest thing you miss about touring?
All of it. Man, just all of it. Just playing music with the band, seeing people, seeing my friends. A lot of it is just the bluegrass community. Is really a community of itself. And there are a lot of bands, a lot of other, a lot of friends who are musicians in these other bands that I just don't see unless we're at the same festival. So I miss the guys from Special Consensus. I miss Greg Cahill. I haven't seen Greg in a while. I haven't seen any of the folks that are out there, and the fans too. They're fans that you rely on. You're used to seeing. They show up at your shows. If you're going to this place, you're going to see these people. If you're going to this place, see these people, and I miss seeing them. And of course, the music part of it. I miss the just you work on playing these songs. And you get together and you rehearse with the band and you play them and you make them as good as you can, but they don't become real until you get on stage and you do them in front of people, and then you hear a reaction. You hear from people telling you what some of the songs mean to them, or that they really enjoyed that show or something, and that's getting to the act of doing it. Yeah, I miss that a lot, and it's coming. We're booked. The Becky Buller Band is playing the end of March. Or the end of May. We're gonna be in. We're playing in Branson. We're at Silver Dollar City.
Cool.
Big back after a year.
Yeah, that's gonna be fun. That's gonna be a weird feeling, huh? But a good one, I hope. Getting up on.
I hope. I am. As a matter of fact, as of today, I am 14 days past my second COVID shot. So I am going out. I'm just gonna walk. When we're done with this, I'm walking outside. I'm just gonna start hugging random people. Break in, buddy.
Oh man, isn't it weird? I mean, it's a weird.
Did that yesterday with my neighbor across the street. She moved here a year ago as the lockdown started.
Oh wow.
And her experience of living in Nashville has been holed up in her sister's house. And so she's fully vaccinated, and I am. And yesterday we were out there talking, and I hugged her for the first time. I've known this woman for a year, and we've become friends. And it's like, hey, we're safe now.
Was it an immediate thing, or did you feel like you had to check in to make sure it was okay?
We checked in, but then, like, wow, and she was like, "Nice to meet you," and I was like, "I know."
Wow, that's bizarre. Well, I'm glad you got to hug someone. That's
and
okay, I got a couple of questions here, which are a bit more along the should we say technique and technical side of things, if that's okay. How are you for time? Are you good for time?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we'll do a few more and see where we go. So Isaac writes, I would love to know if Ned has some tips for not missing the strings and how to avoid curling in the thumb, especially after numerous times of playing a roll, not in the beginning of it, he says. Any advice for
the strings, not and something about doing what with his thumb? Is
curling in the thumb, especially after numerous times of playing a roll.
So I think what he might be talking about is doing this, is kind of moving his thumb, like that, and that's I've seen people doing that, and I've seen it become an annoying habit for somebody. I don't have a specific remedy for that. I'll tell you what I've seen people do. I actually saw somebody one time. They took one of those little hair clips, like those little ones that sort of snap closed, and I saw a guy who stuck one of those under his thumb pick to hold. It almost built his own brace to keep his knuckle of his thumb from doing this, because his thumb was just sort of hitting random strings. As with anything else, this is one of the things that I'll try to tell students to do, and I'll do this in banjo camps and workshops a lot, is I'll tell people to watch their right hand or their picking hand from a couple different angles. Sit back like this, so I'm looking now across the plane of the string. So as I look, all I see is one string, and then I'm watching to see how far down my picks are going past the plane of the strings. So my goal is I want to pick with just like the bottom quarter of that pick, just the tip of it. I don't want to be going all the way down in there. And the same thing for my thumb pick. I don't want my thumb pick to go down so far that it's smacking against the head. A lot of people, you see the evidence of it. You see the witness marks of where the pick's been smacking the head. And the only real solution of that is slow and steady. It's just practice stuff, holding your hand in one position and keeping an eye on where that goes. At some point, it's going to be slow enough that you can control it. As soon as you start to go past that point, you're going to start noticing things getting all wobbly again. Go back to that point and practice that point and slowly raise that bar. I started out paying really close attention to that. I don't know why. It was just something that was important to me. I was watching my hand a lot. One of the things I used to do when I was at my mom and dad's house and learning how to play the banjo, they had one of those sliding glass doors in the kitchen, that went to the back yard. And I would sit in a kitchen chair with my knees up against the glass, and I would watch my right hand in the reflection of that door.
Wow.
Door. And not only could I see the reflection of my hand, but I could hear it really well. The sound of it was bouncing back at me. And I would listen really closely to each string being even, or trying to make one string, so that I could go like, and then try to just do the second string, or just the first string, or just the fifth string, and be able to control which string was getting the power at any particular time. And if you can't do that, well, spend a little time doing that, and the other thing I'll tell people is, and this is one that we forget, we always think when we're practicing, practice the song you're working on, practice the new lick you're working on, practice the whatever the thing is, but we don't practice how we sound. Practice at least one time a week when you're practicing. Practice for tone. Practice for getting a clean sound out of everything. Make sure that that every note is evenly spaced. Make sure each note sounds good. Make sure all your pull-offs sound nice. Make sure your slides, you don't lift your fingers up too quick. Practice thinking about sound. And there was another quote that I read, I think this was in a book that Bill Keith wrote. He said, when you're practicing just one lick, like if you're just going to practice that, he said, pretend that is one piece of music. That's the world's shortest song. It's just that. Make it sound beautiful on its own, Give it all the attention that a full piece of music deserves. And then when you learn the next thing, make sure that this one, give it everything. Make every note of it count. Every note is just as important as every other one. And extrapolate from there.
I can't ask for much more than that, really. That's very cool. We're going to wrap up with one more. Just one other question that came up because it was being discussed a little bit in the chat room. Do you have an opinion on what is easier to learn, the banjo or the guitar?
Oh, the banjo.
See? Easy.
Sure. Well, and I'll run this by you real quick. This was a lesson that my friend Steve Cunningham at Baltimore Bluegrass, where me and Mike used to work, he used to give this lesson on we called it the 5-minute banjo lesson, where and I'm going to condense it and make it a little bit shorter here, but the whole point to it was, he said, play a melody, and he did Yankee Doodle. So you're going to play all the melody on just the 3rd and 4th string. Fill in those spaces by playing the 5th string. Now, between every note, play just the 1st string. And then, for the master class, alternate between your index and middle fingers. So you're going thumb 1, thumb 2, thumb 1, thumb 2. And then give it the Kruger wiggle.
You got to have the Kruger wiggle. I love that. That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing.
The Kruger wiggle, man.
Get the Kruger wiggle. God bless him. All right, Ned, thank you so much. That was fantastic.
This has been fun.
Yeah, that was good. Any final thoughts you want to share? Or you want to play us out some?
The other final thought is just remember, everything, whatever it is, I don't care if you're playing the Wedding March or the Kentucky Waltz, you can end any song with haircut will stop a train.
Okay, here's the challenge. You go play something and end on that. He's away. Just like that. Ned Luberecki, thank you so much for your time. You're a scholar and a gentleman. David, see you soon.
And a gentleman.
Yeah. Thanks, Ned. It's a lot of fun.
Thanks, guys. Thank you very much.
See you next week, everybody, and be safe out there. Thank you.
Bye.